So, anything else on, yeah?
I have, and I'm sorry if you addressed this when I stepped out, but if you're in a situation where you had two roommates who were staying together, one of them's moving out and they want the utility bill taken out of their name, but they still have a balance, the person staying there, they want to get the utility in their name, but what's happened is that now the utility company wants to see something that says it's a different household because they're thinking that you're just, switching the names on the utilities.
Well, my understanding is, and again, this is not formally in writing, is that Massachusetts follows customer of record, so that if my name is on the bill, I'm responsible for it whether or not I live there. So, you open an account to help your kid get service. And if your name is not on the account, you're not responsible for it. So I don't think the utility company can reject a request from the person moving out to terminate that account. And I don't think the utility can reject a request from someone else who doesn't owe the company money to put it in their name.
So if you get that, they should definitely call the consumer.
Yeah, this is another gray area, but I think the Consumer Division's rules are, you don't owe the money, it wasn't in your name, you get service in your name. Okay, so I covered obligation for someone else's bill. So now I'm going to say a few words about telephone service. And the very last sheet, it's on tan paper, Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation, tells you a little bit about what I'm going to talk about. So first of all, it's important to know that there is a discount rate for telephones, and mostly talking wireline, although I'll say a little bit about the discount programs for wireless. It's called Lifeline. It knocks off about $18 a month from your phone bill, which is a little over $200 a year. There's only one of 6 or so programs you can be on, so it's not like the electric and gas discounts where I said you can be on any income-tested program whatsoever. Below 60% of median, you can get on the electric and gas discounts. For the telephone, you have to be on one of the 6 or so programs listed on the first page of that tan sheet handout, Consumer Affairs and Business Regulation. If you're eligible for Lifeline, which is the monthly discount, you're also eligible for Link Up, which reduces the installation charge, because for phones there is an initial installation charge. And so there's a little more information there. Recently, TracFone has been offering a discounted service for poor people called SafeLink. And at first I was very skeptical of SafeLink, but I've been hearing from folks who work with homeless folks that it's actually a good thing because many homeless folks obviously can't get a wireline phone. It gets you a free phone. It gets you all of 80 minutes a month free. So I think their business model is they're hoping you'll use way more minutes than 80 and they're going to make a lot of money off you. But it at least gives that person 80 minutes of free phone service and they don't have to pay for a phone. The problems with SafeLink are, particularly because it's useful for homeless people, people in shelters, people in congregate housing. TracFone has a couple of rules that actually makes it hard for those folks. One is, from TracFone's perspective, you have to be at a residential address, and many of those situations look like a commercial address when they look at a database. There's an advocate at Greater Boston Legal Services, Deb Filler, who has a contact at a kind of government relations contact at TracFone who tries to solve that. So I think if you prove, no, it's really a YMCA. YMCAs look like commercial addresses, but it's basically a building filled with residential folks, or it's the following transitional housing. Because it's a nonprofit, it looks like a commercial address from your perspective. It's a residence. You can maybe solve that problem, and I don't have that name, so you could contact Deb Filler at Greater Boston Legal Services. And a somewhat related problem to the commercial address is TracFone has a rule that they can only give you one SafeLink phone at any one address. So if this really was an apartment or a one-family home, I get that they don't want the federal government, because we collect money to subsidize this, the federal government doesn't want 2 people at one address to be getting the phone. But if you think about a lot of these YMCAs, group homes, transitional housing, these are completely unrelated people who don't get to use each other's cell phones. TracFone believes or claims that requirement was imposed on it by the Federal Communications Commission, and they actually have a petition before the Federal Communications Commission saying, you know what, let's lift that rule. If we can prove these are really independent people living in some congregate situation, more than one person per building could get a phone. That's pending. Again, I believe Deb Filler was able to work these out individually on a case-by-case basis. I don't particularly endorse SafeLink, but I'm also not saying, gee, don't let anybody use it. It seems to be of some value to folks. So there is a Lifeline type program for that particular wireless service. There are also a few rules about telephones, like the protections I was talking about. The telephone rules are very obscure and hard to find, so we, in our infinite kindness, reproduced those rules in the book. They start on page 125 of the book, Appendix H, Rules and Practices Relating to Telephone Service to Residential Customers. And the rules I will be talking about are in Part 5, starting on page 132, discontinuance of service and removal of accounts. So let me say, there is a serious illness rule, kind of like the electric and gas, if you're low income and have a serious illness. However, the serious illness letter is good for 30 days, so there is no such thing as a 90-day or 6-month-long serious illness letter, and it's only renewable twice. The electric and gas serious illness letters, you can just keep renewing and keep renewing and keep renewing. So the longest you could protect service is 90 days. You can send in a 30-day letter, renew it twice, 90 days, that's it as far as I know it. Also, in my limited experience, because I don't deal with these phone issues that much, Verizon is much more difficult in asserting any of these protections than the electric and gas companies. And there's another rule, it's the personal emergency rule. And so there's no such similar rule with the electric and gas companies. If you're low income and, quote, experiencing a personal emergency, I don't think it's actually defined in the regs. You get phone service continued. So this would be on page 135, personal emergency. You get phone service protected for 30 days. My sense is, so it's 135, Rule 5.17. If the customer claims in writing and can demonstrate that he or she is unable to pay an outstanding bill and that a personal emergency exists, the company shall postpone discontinuation of service or restore it if it has been discontinued, and that protection lasts 30 days. Personal emergency is not defined. My theory is anybody working with you will have a personal emergency if they don't already have one, if they can't communicate with you, so you could help them certify the personal emergency, that something you're dealing with, they must be having some kind of personal emergency. I personally have never seen anybody use this. I'm not saying it doesn't happen, I just don't do enough phone work. I encourage you to give it a shot when it seems like it will help protect the phone for another 30 days. There are elderly rules that are very similar to the electric and gas rules, so I won't say much more about it. Again, that would be in the book starting around 132. And basically, cell phones are not covered by any regulation, really. So, you know, the Department of Telecommunications and Cable in Massachusetts has close to zero jurisdiction over cell phones. A few miscellaneous things. I met with Project Bread about a year ago, so it just reminded me, of course. Most of our clients that we're dealing with, they're also having food issues. There's a great hotline, it's on that slide, called Food Issues. People should definitely use that. And if there are no more questions, I'm going to close with my Margaret Mead quote that I always end with. Never doubt that a small group of committed individuals can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has changed the world. So go out and change the world, folks, and thank you.